Hello. To continue the ongoing conversation about the question, is globalization in retreat, we are joined by Camila Nogués, a renewed cultural and social anthropologist, Alejandra Cabrera, a distinguished member of International Conservation, global nonprofit organization for the environment, Carolina Rodríguez, who is an outstanding economist, Stefanie Ochsenbauer, a computer science engineer, and me, Eizabeth Sanchez, a respectable politician. Let me start with you, Carolina. You know, when we look at the world and see phenomena such as Brexit that impacts both Britain and the European Union members' economy, it seems like globalization is in retreat.
Somehow, we can validate that statement. For many years, the United States and Britain were representative leaders of the globalization phenomenon. Being such powerful empires, they imposed their currency, their commercial conditions, they grew their companies outside their borders, and designated financial institutions such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, among others, so that the economic vision of the Western world would be replicated worldwide. Under a nationalistic perspective such as Brexit in Great Britain or the Trump administration, Make America Great Again, the focus changes as a protective measure where globalization is not the main core. The governments of such countries have stated that the domestic economy prevails over international relations.
Sure, if we see it from a political view, there are also situations like United States and China who established new tax policies and tariff increases on the products of their rivals. Prior to this, Trump has already announced that an alternative that did not involve producing or manufacturing things in China would be considered, to which China responded by raising its tariffs. This constant Cold War between the two powers was called the Commercial War. As we can tell, it is evident that this affects globalization, since it makes it difficult to integrate the markets and politics into international politics or a world market in which similar products are traded, produced by companies whose origin is difficult to determine since their operations are distributed in several countries. These protectionist policies that go further of improving economic activity have an important cultural and social component, for example, immigration and terrorism.
That's right. Although globalization's main focus for many years has been to service the right frontiers, mainly in markets, in political structures, and in cultural interaction, resulting in global interdependence, everything that results in the ability of capital and services to act freely on a global level. Socially and culturally, globalization has suffered a retreat, since in our reality today we can clearly see how intolerance and discrimination prevail between countries. An excellent example is countries in Central and Eastern Europe closing its borders to refugees. This not only shows us intolerance towards refugees disguised as excuses and justifications for terrorism, but it is also an immense setback in globalization, because migration is one of the most visible and significant aspects of globalization, and by closing these borders, the space for these interactions is almost completely closed.
Yes, European countries are experiencing a migration crisis as well. Politicians have begun exploiting the terror attacks as a platform of demagoguery, citing unsustainable suspicions of links between terrorism and Syrian refugees. Several countries have closed their borders by justifying that the attacks signaled a need to reestablish their own borders. Migration is one of the most visible and significant aspects of globalization. Growing numbers of people move within countries and across borders, looking for better employment opportunities and better lifestyles. Closing borders is both a threat and an obstacle to it, due to the fact that migration contributes to sustainable development. Refugees are also among the most acute victims of the kind of terror for which they're being collectively punished. Closing borders for security is useless and only affects the already marginalized population.
The problem with protectionist policies is that they directly affect important global environmental issues. The USA, for example, pulling out of the Treaty of Paris, which was focused on reducing the carbon footprint and fighting against climate change, has an important environmental weight. We, as environmentalists, hope that after the major diplomatic role at the United Nations and the election of Joe Biden, USA and China cooperate over plans to drastically cut emissions. It's obvious that there are major disagreements between these countries, but climate needs to stand alone. Indeed, it's absolutely critical to fight the climate crisis. More than being in retreat, I think that globalization is moving forward. And from an environmental perspective, we need that. Roger Harabin, BBC Environmental Analysis, informs that the USA hopes to persuade President Xi to attend next week's virtual summit. 40 world leaders have been invited, including Russia's Vladimir Putin. Global heating needs to be kept well below 2 centigrades above pre-industrial levels, but in fact, we are aiming from 1.5 centigrades to avoid the worst climate breakdown. Agreements and cooperation are needed. In this moment, the world cannot afford deglobalization.
From an economic perspective, I agree. Not complying with globalization can put us at risk. Global supply chains have been developed for over 3 decades, and recreating new nationalistic supply chains is definitely not an option. It is worth mentioning that for many major companies, their main income comes from abroad. Also, there are some countries that are highly specialized in manufacturing certain kinds of goods or mining and farming raw commodities. Deglobalization can create chaos and very dangerous imbalances.
The world does not need deglobalization, technological speaking. If we deglobalize, the producing, exporting, and importing countries would be at a disadvantage compared to the self-sufficient countries. Thus, this will create mainly more economic inequality in the world than the one that already exists. In third world countries like ours, technology is not a priority, so this means that we would not advance as a society.
So is deglobalization not happening, or do we not want it to happen?
The reality is that what is disconvenient for us is that globalization is undergoing a setback, so we do not want this to happen. In social and cultural sphere, I would say that globalization is undergoing a transformation, not a setback. Countries now have a strong tendency to internalize trade, economy, relationships, etc. I believe that the fact that the United States has taken the steps towards a new globalization different from the one we knew is going to incite other powers to do the same, but this does not necessarily mean a bad thing.
I strongly believe that it's not happening. We might have countries pulling out of environmental agreements, but at the same time, we have so many countries trying to find solutions. Another important point I would like to make is that it is not only about the governments anymore. We have non-governmental organizations like Conservation International dedicated to protect the most fundamental things that nature provides for us: food, fresh water, our livelihoods, and a stable climate. We work with governments, business leaders, and people on the ground to implement real solutions to climate change-related problems. Unlike us, there are many others. We are seeing people from all around the world coming together through platforms to fight for a common cause. That is globalization.
Technology helps us to have quick access to information, facilitates communication, improves entertainment, simplifies tasks, fosters scientific activities, improves transportation, creates new jobs, generates efficiency, among many others. But if it is not used correctly, it also has its disadvantages. Today, globalization is driven by a digital technology, which is led by China and other emerging economies. And from my point of view, we don't want deglobalization to happen, but it is happening, and the pandemic has been a major factor. Since then, everything became more local. If the world economy declines, technology is not sustained. Then the more capital a country has, the more it will invest in technology. World powers stop investing so much in other countries and start investing more in technologies such as automation, advanced robotics, 3D printers, among others, that from my point of view, this also affects globalization.
To expand on what you said about social media, I think it is important to mention how in the cultural and especially social sphere, technology and social networks more specifically have played a very important role. Today, people no longer have to travel or cross border to share ideas. Talking to someone and learning about them or their cultures so that we can adapt to our own is just a click away. In the same way, there is a free exchange of information regarding news and important decisions of each country. This, if we look at it from this perspective, is something that has benefited and transformed the way globalization occurs.
Of course, in relation to what you said, Gami, about social media, politics also have a huge role when it comes to communication networks. As you previously said, countries with access to technology and unlimited social networks are greatly influenced by globalizations. But nations like China or maybe North Korea not the nations, but the people in the nation, the citizens, that have very strict communist governments do not get influenced in the same way.
Personally, I don't want it to happen, and most likely it won't happen. I foresee that some adjustments in the economic field are going to continue. For example, digital and cryptocurrencies are going to take place, substituting fiat money. This will certainly bring a major advantage. We will have a more stable and secure economy. However, totalitarian, authoritarian, or dictatorial regimes may exert obsessive control of our finances and would disconnect us from the economy if they will.
That's very interesting. So, in summary, technology is playing an important role in this new era of globalization.
Yeah, the role and importance of technologies is currently indisputable. Technology changes the world in different ways. The internet and the new information technologies have revolutionized the way of working, doing businesses, learning, among others. The boom of social networks is making the relationship between man, technology, and business intervene, and it also encourages socioeconomic development to continue. So new digital technologies mean that more people than ever can participate in cross-border transactions.
Yes, if we preserve the concepts of economic freedom, it will be difficult for deglobalization to be effective, since with greater level of economic freedom, an environment of voluntary economic transactions of global scope will succeed.
I couldn't agree more with what has already been said, but to sum up a bit what I mentioned before, I consider that globalization, with the help of technology and new political and social leaders, is undergoing a transformation that is constantly being seen mistaken for a setback.
Despite you can claim that recent events may point to a deglobalization, I consider that they are just a fraction of the reality we live in today. The movement to fight climate change involves everyone, no matter the country they live in, and with SDGs that is clearer than ever.
Yes, I also agree with you guys. I believe globalization is not in retreat. It has only entered a different phase due to internet. There is a revamped version of globalization with digital underpinnings and shifting geopolitics. Today, globalization is driven by digital technologies, which means that more actors from around the world can participate in cross-border transactions than ever before. It was great having this conversation with you guys. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.